The 2028 election should belong to Bernie Sanders' successor. There's just one problem. They do not exist. It's a good time to be Bernie Sanders. Most polls show he's the most popular incumbent politician in America. He's the second most popular figure among Democrats, after Barack Obama. The electorate has come around to a lot of his positions, like on data centers. Socialists have more political power than any time since before World War II. And progressives are winning more primaries in more purple territory than ever before. All of that, on paper, should make 2028 an optimal moment for Bernie's movement, for his successor to claim the Democratic nomination, which is part of why there's a lot of conversation about who that successor is. Except there's a little issue with that. There probably isn't anyone who can actually be Bernie's successor. And as long as people overlook that fact, they're going to be missing something big about the 2028 race. Now, there's a few reasons that Bernie is not replicable, including what I would say is the biggest one. But let's start here. Number one, the outsider brand. A big part of Bernie's appeal has always been his very obvious distaste for the pageantry of politics. Go back to 2015. Everyone else was announcing their presidential campaigns in ballrooms or in front of landmarks or in carefully lit videos. He announced on the lawn outside the Capitol, and he actually told reporters there that they needed to hurry the whole thing up.
We don't have an endless amount of time. I've got to get back.
And the ways he's gone viral in the years since have all kind of orbited this idea that he's a little bit of a grumpy, kind of rumpled old man, way different from the normally polished, manicured politician type. And that's both pretty obviously charming, even to people who don't like him, and actually has been a real political asset. It's added to the sense that this is a guy who's so honest and so direct and so authentic that he doesn't care about the performative BS for a lot of reasons. Generational, personality, gender, race, personal choice. That is fundamentally not the vibe of anyone, let alone any progressive, who is on the radar for 2028. But this is bigger than just aesthetics. It's also about record. A central part of Bernie's political identity is that he has been a longtime dissident in DC, a lone soldier who got attacked for being outside of the mainstream, and who did that at a time when there was a real social, cultural, and political cost for doing so. This is something really worth lingering on, because the way politics works now is fundamentally different than even 15 years ago. Before the 2010s, the whole concept of small dollar fundraising, regular people sending campaigns 30, 60, 100 bucks, was way different. Small dollar donors began to rise in the late 2000s, especially after Howard Dean's 2004 campaign, and then exploded in the 2010s, especially after Bernie's campaign. And that change happened in tandem with changes to the news industry. The monopoly that old papers and channels had ended. Now, you can get political news from a million different outlets. Hey, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to my newsletter down below. Together, those shifts broke the stranglehold that the DC establishment used to have on a lot of people in government. Before, when someone broke with the mainstream consensus, it was much easier to shut down their ability to get media attention or raise campaign money. Now, you can go around those old structures and get coverage and cash entirely on your own, outside of the establishment. And again, this is so normal now that it's funny to even mention it. But it's really worth remembering what it was like to be in politics before that, as Bernie was. He was way outside of the mainstream at a time when that was a lot harder, when you couldn't just tell mainstream media or donors to buzz off. So his willingness to stand up to the establishment by endorsing gay rights way before other Democrats, by voting against the Patriot Act or the bank bailout, by advocating wealth redistribution when that was treated like a sin against America, was inherently a bigger risk, which carried a higher cost. All the more so given the center of gravity in politics in the 90s and 2000s was very tilted to the right. And that has always been a huge part of Bernie's success, especially in 2016. That record gave him credibility to argue to voters, both on the left and not on the left, that he really truly did care about their issues, and that he really truly could resist the pressures of the establishment, because he had already done it. It's this sense of, I was right when everyone else was wrong. I was right when it cost me a lot to be right. But here's the thing. We are in a completely different universe now. It's a testament to Bernie's success that the center of gravity in Democratic politics is way further to the left than it was 10 years ago. And that combination, the Overton window shifting and the media and campaign finance systems evolving to make it safer to defy the establishment, means that Bernie-esque politics is nowhere near as much of a risk as it used to be. Not saying no risk, but way, way less than it was. And that means something real for 2028 contenders, that anyone trying to be Bernie's successor is not going to walk into that race with the same strong brand identity that Bernie had in 2016 or 2020. They're not going to be able to run on the idea that they were a lone voice in a corrupt establishment. And that means losing a really core part of Bernie's identity. Number 2, the 20th century versus 21st century left. This is the big one. There's always been this really funny dichotomy with Bernie Sanders. He has all the marks of what some people think of when they think of kooky lefties. He took his honeymoon in the Soviet Union. He lived on a commune. He recorded a spoken word folk album. And he is also this extremely all-American dude who codes in this very 20th century apple pie America way. He loves baseball. He lives in and represents a rural state. Vermont is the most rural state in the country. He's the child of European immigrants. He has a regional accent. He's a white guy with a Brooklyn accent because he grew up in a time before white flight, when working class white people still lived in major American cities. A lot of these are throwbacks in and of themselves. For example, regional accents are dying out, baseball is nowhere near America's most popular sport anymore, and barely any immigrants come to the US from Europe. But more than that, they also all harken back to a different era of the Democratic Party, when it was competitive in rural areas, when its base of support was white ethnic immigrant communities and unions, when its organizing principle was populist pro-labor economic policy, and there was more diversity of thought on cultural issues. And Bernie's actual record backed that up. While also being way to the left of other Democrats on economics, he broke with them on some gun policy, or spoke about immigration in ways that other Democrats would never.
Open borders.
Open borders.
That's a Koch brothers proposal. I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the
global
global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state.
Now, some of that did change in the 2020 campaign. He moved noticeably left on cultural issues that year. But this whole theme came back during the racial justice protests later that year, when basically every other progressive endorsed defunding the police. He very specifically did not. And that combination, his personal background, his economic positions, his sometimes heterodox cultural positions, really mattered, because it assuaged concerns that he was a radical, that he wanted to take America in some new, extreme direction. He was able to say, both implicitly and explicitly, no, I just want to return to something we were once before, the class-centered, labor-powered Democratic Party of yesteryear. And it's important to remember, this was a both-and pitch, to dial up the economic progressivism and dial down some of the cultural progressivism. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at where he won in 2016. It's got memory hold a little bit, but Bernie's 2016 coalition was this fascinating mix of the most progressive and the most conservative parts of the Democratic Party. He cleaned up among college graduates living in hip cities like Seattle, Portland, or the gentrifying parts of Brooklyn. And he also won every county in West Virginia. Basically, he won people who felt that Hillary Clinton was too corporatist and moderate, and those who felt she was too metropolitan and culturally liberal. And remember, this isn't because he himself is some closet conservative on cultural issues. He was out front on stuff like gay rights before most Democrats. It's simply because his priority is economics. That's what he returns to. That's what he cares about. That's what he wants to be the link between members of the Democratic Party. And he has put real meat on this theory of politics. One example is this from 2017, when he campaigned for a Democrat who had previously backed abortion restrictions. A lot of other Democrats, including a lot of people loyal to Hillary Clinton, were furious about that. Their implicit argument was, hey, we can have different ideas about healthcare policy or regulation of the big banks, but we all need to be on the same page about stuff like abortion. Bernie's argument has always been the opposite. That progressive economic policy is what Democrats should agree on, and they should be more willing to allow a wider variety of cultural views. And this is where it becomes really difficult to imagine Bernie's successors being able to replicate that formula. And that includes AOC and Ro Khanna, the two people most associated with this conversation. Let's just zoom out. For example, whereas Bernie had a record of living in, running in, and winning in rural areas, basically all of the DSA members or Bernie-aligned progressives in Congress come from deep blue urban areas. Not just AOC and Khanna, who represent New York City and the San Francisco Bay Area. There's Rashida Tlaib in Detroit, Ilhan Omar, Minneapolis, Summer Lee, Pittsburgh, Greg Casar, Austin, Delia Ramirez, Chicago, Pramila Jayapal, Seattle. It goes on and on and on. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with living in cities. I love it, can't imagine not doing it. What this is about is the political muscles you grow when you have to campaign in more hostile areas. Remember, when Bernie was elected to the House as a socialist, the state of Vermont had voted Republican in 31 of the past 32 presidential elections. That's all but one election for 128 years. While we think of Vermont as true blue now, Bernie clearly grew those muscles by having to run there. He had a sense for where the electorate actually was during Woke 1, and he never went all in on unpopular positions or alienating ways of speaking. None of his successors have quite the same track record. And especially in AOC's case, there's actually a long record of the exact kind of lefty cultural stances and avant-garde academic language that Bernie intentionally never took. And so with that, the scoreboard starts to look pretty daunting. Bernie, a long record of being a principled, lonely progressive voice. AOC and Khanna, their entire congressional careers came after 2016, when the rules had already changed. Bernie has run and won in diverse areas. AOC and Khanna have only ever run in deep blue cities. Bernie has displayed genuinely nuanced and heterodox thoughts on immigration, crime, and culture. AOC and Khanna have not. And when you look at it like that, the entire idea that there could be anyone like Bernie, let alone an actual successor, feels almost silly. Partly because Bernie is just a statistically improbable combination of identities and life forces. Now here's the counterargument. That might not matter. Bernie did not win the nomination both times he ran. And whatever you think about the genuinely unfair things that happened, he objectively did not lose solely because of them. To win the 2028 nomination, a progressive Bernie successor would need to not lose almost every county in the South, or not collapse when it becomes a one-on-one race. And they would need to get more support from non-white Democrats, or more normie Democrats who actually like the party. As polls show, most registered Democrats do. So perhaps being different from Bernie is in fact partly an asset, a broadening of his appeal. We don't know. There's also the very real fact that Democratic voters have moved noticeably left since 2016 or even 2020. The terrain itself might just be easier. But what is Bernie Sanders without the things that make Bernie Sanders? It's not totally clear. And it could mean anyone banking on just being Bernie's successor is in for a rude awakening. People in politics love to talk about this concept of lanes. And it's already starting to pop up in the 2028 analysis. The progressive lane, the moderate lane, the Bernie lane. That's always been a bit of a myth. That is just not how normal people vote or think about politics. If you need proof, look back to the 2020 Democratic primary. That year, people were obsessed with sorting candidates like Biden and Buttigieg into the moderate lane and Warren and Bernie into the progressive lane. In reality, most polls showed that the second choice of most Buttigieg voters was Warren, and the second choice of most Biden voters was Bernie, because voting preferences are a complicated cocktail of culture, education, identity, race, ideology, on and on. That's part of how Bernie beat Hillary in the Michigan primary in 2016, and then lost every county in Michigan to Biden in 2020. It's part of how Abdul El-Sayed won his Michigan primary with a way different coalition than Bernie had in Michigan. People are complicated, and Bernie's coalition, his lane, was always as complicated as he was. The Bernie of 2016 might well clean up in 2028, but that is not an option. And unless progressives figure out a way to be more like Bernie himself, deciding who his successor is might be the least of their problems. What do you think about all this? You think I'm way off base? You think anyone can do Bernie again? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe to the channel and my newsletter.